Hello, friends. Do you believe in fate? This question may seem philosophical at first glance. Actually, the heroes in our story today claim that everything in life happens for a reason. There's a place for real miracles in our world, and I'm confident that you'll start believing in them after hearing this story. Who knows? Maybe you'll even start thinking about things like fate, karma, and a higher power. However, first things first. Michael Shannon is a pediatrician, and almost every resident of Orange County knows him. Many parents want him to treat their children. The kind doctor. That's what all his patients began to call him over time. Despite his profession, Michael Shannon never wears a white coat. He does it for his little patients because it often happens that a child gets frightened and starts crying from just seeing a doctor in a white coat, which causes unnecessary stress. Michael has worked as a pediatrician for over 44 years. He communicates with his patients in a fun but composed way. His qualifications and work experience allow him to treat even the most difficult patients. Therefore, it's not surprising that the little Chris Tronke's parents turned to him back in 1986. According to world statistics, about 15 million babies are born prematurely every year. This is exactly what happened to Chris. Jane Tronke, the little boy's mother, didn't understand why it happened. After all, her pregnancy was going well. I remember I was going to the supermarket, and when I bent down to get my bag, I suddenly felt a sharp pain in my lower abdomen. Then everything was like a haze. The hospital, premature birth, and the tiny Chris, Jane later recalled. Even though the baby was born almost 2 months before his due date, his weight was pretty good, about 3 pounds. Although the doctor didn't want to give the parents false hope, they never stopped fighting for their child's life. The boy was taken to intensive care. By the way, the doctors weren't sure if they would be able to stabilize the baby. But, much to everyone's surprise, Chris turned out to be a real fighter and quickly got better. He spent only 10 days in the intensive care unit and another month or so in the hospital. The doctors told us that Chris had no abnormalities and that our boy was healthy. After being discharged, we threw a party. If only we knew that the struggle was still ahead, Chris's mother said later. Jane and her husband devoted all their time to their little boy, and nothing boded trouble. But then Jane noticed that something was wrong. Chris was restless, fussy, and refused to eat. So Jane decided to take the child's temperature and was horrified that it was 103. Her baby was running a high fever, and something needed to be done urgently. Jane had heard from other mothers about the high-qualified doctor, Michael Shannon, so she quickly dialed his number. It was late, but nonetheless, Michael was standing on the doorstep of the family's house in just 10 minutes. The little Chris's condition was very bad. The fever wouldn't subside on the first night, but Michael didn't give up and fought for the baby's life for the next few days. The parents were stunned that the doctor didn't leave the patient even for a minute. He spent several days in the family's house, forgetting about his own life, only going home from time to clean up and change. It was then that Jane realized why this doctor had such a reputation. He seemed to live only for the sake of his little patients. By the way, friends, a miracle did happen. Thanks to Dr. Shannon's attention and care, the temperature subsided after a few days, and Chris's health improved. So, the baby boy got his own Santa, and an irresistible passion for ambulances. Many years passed since then. Chris grew up and made his dreams come true. He became a paramedic. He loves his job and was completely devoted to it. After all, he understood that human lives depended on his attentiveness and dexterity. The young man worked as part of the fire brigade and was one of the first responders, giving first aid to the victims. And friends, this story could have taken a completely different turn, and the two could have never met again if it wasn't for what happened on March 10th, 2011. It was all right late at night, and Chris's team was heading home. Their shift had ended about an hour ago, and they were on their way back from the neighboring city. They were all very tired after their shift, but when they entered the city, an urgent call came in. The dispatcher reported that an accident had occurred a few kilometers from the city, and the on-call team wouldn't make it in time. Of course, they could have simply ignored the message, because in fact they were no longer at work. But Chris, being the shift leader, told them to urgently turn the car around. He couldn't have even imagined what was awaiting him. An SUV driver was returning home after a visit to his friend who lived on the coast. He knew the road well and was relaxed. Nothing boded trouble, but suddenly, after another turn, he saw the headlights of another oncoming car. There was a strong hit, and the car turned over, and then there was darkness. It turned out that the oncoming van failed to follow the road bend, crashing into the man's SUV. The driver lost consciousness after the crash, but he soon came to his senses. Having composed his thoughts, he realized that he was trapped. He was pinned down by the steering wheel and couldn't move his legs. However, that wasn't what scared him. He could smell gasoline and something burning, and a moment later, he felt his feet heating up and the soles of his boots melting. I realized that it was highly unlikely that anyone would make it on time to rescue me. I already said goodbye to my life in my mind, but death didn't scare me. I had lived a happy life, which I wasn't ashamed of. Just when I was thinking about the end, I saw the lights of a rescue vehicle out of the corner of my eye. I couldn't believe my eyes, and I didn't really believe they would manage to save me. The 72-year-old SUV driver later recalled, "The rescue team saw that the car was already on fire, and they had only a few seconds to make a decision. Without looking for a place to park the fire engine, they drove it right into the ditch with the burning SUV and acted quickly. The car's gasoline tank could blow up at any second, but risking their own lives, the rescuers extinguished the fire and pulled the elderly man out of the red-hot and crumbled car. The man was sent to the hospital by ambulance. Chris gave first aid and tried to keep the driver awake all the way. He made every effort to keep the patient alive. He didn't even know who the man was at the time. When they got to the hospital, Chris found out the patient's name and couldn't believe in such a coincidence. Yes, friends, I think you've already guessed that the elderly driver, whom Chris saved that night, was the same doctor who saved him at birth 25 years earlier. Chris was shocked. He just couldn't grasp it. After all, it was thanks to that man that he had become a paramedic and devoted his life to helping people. The man was a real hero for him. His mother and his father told him repeatedly that it was thanks to this doctor that he had survived as a child. However, Chris decided not to say anything to the 72-year-old doctor. He understood that the elderly man who had been between life and death didn't need any extra stress at the moment. 2 days later, I went to see Michael. Having learned that he was stable and already come to his senses, I decided to reveal my identity to him. Although many years have passed, he remembered me, Chris said. He squeezed my hand tightly and said that he has always known that I would grow into a worthy man. Then he even started crying. It wasn't only the 72-year-old doctor that cried at the hospital that day, but also the 25-year-old paramedic and everyone who had learned the stories of the two men and their intertwined destinies. After that day, Chris and Michael became good friends and decided never to part again. After all, as they both say, all this happened for a reason. Something brought them together twice, which meant it didn't want them to part. Michael Shannon even became the pediatrician for Chris's son, little Rocky. And Chris also wants Michael to be his son's godfather. These two rescue stories seem incredible, especially given the many little details that were crucial to making the decisions. Each man admits that when they were rescuing the other, they had an overwhelming feeling. They both knew that it was exactly what they had to do, as if something was leading them. A guardian angel, they both think. So that's the whole story, friends. What do you think about it? Is it just a coincidence, or is it something more? Be sure to let us know what you think in the comments. That's all for today. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. See you soon. Bye.